Oh my, could what happened to Diddy's girlfriend happen to you? Yes, it can. And this is how we avoid it. The most shocking thing of the whole Diddy saga was that his girlfriend had two parents and her father was a traditional Filipino. So how did someone so loved get into such an abusive relationship when she had such amazing parents? And how in a happy family could you be groomed for abuse? And what should you do to prevent abuse in relationships? Ramasani, how do you do? Western feminism, Western values, plus traditional parenting, raising a lady to be a good girl, led to Cassie being groomed for abuse. Since it's such a common thing, I would like to explain how this could happen to you and how you can avoid it. And what lessons can we learn from the, P Diddy trial so that we can avoid being hurt ourselves. So the most important thing is P Diddy, who abused Cassie, his ex-girlfriend. He preyed on her. She was 19 when he preyed on her. He called her malleable. That's the most important thing. She was a good girl. Therefore, he preyed on that softness and femininity, right? She was malleable. She was submissive, right? Because traditional parenting, right? She was a good girl. And therefore, he thought she will do whatever he told her to do. And the more he yelled, the more abusive, the more, she would fall in line, right? And if she was older and more confident, or if she was more disagreeable, he would not prey on her and find another target. So if you're raised to be a good girl, you are being groomed for abuse. Of course, that's not what your parents mean, but in the past, there was a Christian or Muslim society, and in the past, you could not date anyone your parents didn't approve of, and your parents had control over what suitors you could see, and you had chaperones and that sort of thing in Victorian England, right? And even in Muslim countries, you have suitors and they see you with your parents present. So even though the Middle East is modernizing, there is still the aspect of protection of young ladies who are more than 2 standard deviations more disagreeable than young gentlemen. See, women are 2 standard deviations more disagreeable than gentlemen, but young ladies far much more so. And I don't believe that young ladies under the age of 25 are capable of consent in relationships any more than a child, because I was that age, right? When we were that age, let's just be honest. When you were 23, when you were in college, you wanted to be liked, right? You wanted to be liked by your boyfriend, so you did things that you wouldn't have done otherwise because you just wanted to be liked, right? I thankfully was too ugly to have a boyfriend at that age, but I did things that, trying to fit in that I didn't like. I pretended that I liked this or that thing to try to make friends when I was not being authentic to myself, and it blew up in my face, right? And though it was much more innocent because I was ugly at that time, God protected me by keeping me ugly at the age where I was too vulnerable to consent to anything. But if you're beautiful and you're 17, 19, right? People will prey on you. This is why I recommend ladies to start dating at 25 also. you have the maturity to say no, and gentlemen know you have the maturity to say no, so they won't be preying on you. So how did Western values feminism, on top of being a good girl, groom Cassie for abuse by P Diddy? And what can we learn from this so that we can avoid abuses? Well, Cassie was taught to be a good girl, right? Especially in traditional cultures, they teach you to be obedient to your significant other, to be submissive, and so on, right? And, but also in the traditional culture, your father or your parents protect you, the church protects you, the community, the values and the tradition protects you, so it's okay to be nice, in a traditional society. But in the West, it will destroy you. So what happened to her is a clash between modernity and traditional values, right? So how did, modern Western values and feminism hurt Cassie, and potentially is hurting you and grooming you for abuse? So let's start with the parenting, right? So we teach that girls are equal to boys. Now this is a problem, right? I was speaking to a friend of my husband and I, his daughter, and he was saying that he's going to be hard on her and make sure she gets all A's, and I said, absolutely not. What's the point of getting all A's if she gets pregnant by a broke, dusty loser boy who just has the right pickup line and become a teenage mom in high school, as she gets her Harvard acceptance letter? What value does her Harvard acceptance letter have if she's a single mom? See, if you have a son, you can be hard on him, he gets to Harvard, he's a great provider, yay. But the biggest problem when you raise a daughter is abusive relations, teenage pregnancy, or pregnancy in general, right? Abuse. Girls are vulnerable. So you can invest everything to get your daughter into Harvard, and then she gets in an abusive relationship, or she gets pregnant and pumped and dumped by a dusty, and all your parental investment goes down the drain. So the most important thing we have to teach girls is not ambition, not going to Harvard or any rubbish like this, which is helpful for boys because if they get into Harvard, they network, they make more money, they have a wider selection of ladies to date. For girls, the most important thing, the highest predictor of a female's success is self-esteem, okay? You can be delusional, but you'll say no to broke, dusty losers who are trying to bully you into being a free escort, free kitty cat, and you get pregnant from them, or worse, you get abused by them and you have trauma for years and have trouble recovering, right? And maybe even a bad reputation, they can threaten you, harass you, and so on. If a boy has low self-esteem, what? As a gentleman, he can work harder, he can be tougher, he can work more on himself. The worst is alcoholism, but most, boys with low self-esteem will just be more humble and work harder. Whereas when a girl has low self-esteem, she will chase boys and get pregnant and possibly get abused, right? It's not a positive thing. So the most important thing when we're raising girls is raising their self-esteem so they do not tolerate rubbish behavior. And when they bring home a D, we clap. You're the prettiest girl in the world, hey! Even if it's a lie. Lie to your daughter that she's the prettiest girl in the world, because her life will depend on it. Say, you're pretty, you're pretty, you're pretty. I don't care what grade you have. You're the most wonderful little princess in the planet, right? Spoiling her, making her delusional, that will prevent her from having low standards. You do not want to teach your daughter to be humble, or she can get abused. Where did feminism go wrong? Feminism went wrong teaching that girls are the same as boys, when girls can get pregnant and are vulnerable and are much more agreeable than gentlemen, and certainly high-powered gentlemen who are the most disagreeable, right? So we are not the same. We're much, especially when you're younger, you're much more vulnerable, okay? First of all. So we're not the same, we're not equal, no matter how much you lie. Second, feminism baits girls into hazard by promoting female ambition instead of promoting that women should stay at home and be mothers, alright? Career, no, women should stay at home and be lazy mothers, or at least housewives, something, and should not be very ambitious, okay? And feminism teaches the opposite. And what's the problem with that, okay? And I say this as having worked in the parliament, a high power environment, and changing from that to a housewife, Wow, in a high power environment, feminism baits you into hazard by not telling you that the dynamics for women are so much more different than for gentlemen. There is a huge power imbalance and so many counter forces. You're extremely vulnerable. I would say stay out of any high power environment, before you're 30, before you're married, right? Because, you have Epstein, Weinstein, right? You have P Diddy. I saw, many ladies, in order to get ahead the most, well, you have to sleep your way to the top or marry your way to the top. I did see that. And then women who slept their way to the top, there was a lot of abuse. And there were a lot of men who were entitled and thought that because they're powerful, therefore you should do that. There was so much entitlement, abuse, and also they would look for willing victims, right? So who is malleable, who is nice, right? If you're disagreeable and would say no, and if they try to blacklist you, I don't care. I will go, to the media, I'll make you famous, unalive me, I don't give a damn. No means that. Tough women like this, the biatches, no one messes with them. Sure, they don't have that career progress, but they don't have the trauma either. The ladies who realized, okay, to skip the line a little bit, they had to pay for it, right? Unless they married up, if they slept their way up without marrying their way up, very often there was a price. The most successful women I saw in politics did not get there by themselves. Either they had a powerful family and then worked on top of this, or they married up, or they did the difficult way of sleeping their way up, right? And that's what Cassie saw. She wanted to get ahead, and feminism promotes ambition. And, the next thing is Western progressive values of drugs, sex, rock and roll. And the entertainment industry, where you constantly sing about doing it, guess what the way up is? Right? It's about banging your boss, then banging your boss's boss, right? If you want to get ahead, this is why, what's the point of promoting ambition in women if all it does is lead to trauma? Because, gentlemen can work their way up, But if you're a woman and a young one, you're seen as agreeable, malleable, you'll be preyed upon. So what's the point? I mean, okay, you'll get so much trauma after all that celebrity, so what is the point? Why go through all that trauma? Why go through the freak-offs? Why go through so many humiliating things? Why have a career in the first place? Just have a job that pays the bills, and interesting hobbies, and then marry up for lifestyle is so much better than what Cassie did. So the next problem with Western progressive society is that the government and corporations promote, this whole drugs, sex, rock and roll, and they promote using women as free escorts for broke, dusty losers so that they don't rebel against the establishment who is sending jobs abroad. Now they're sourcing even finance jobs to India. And, because of the pressure and all the lobbies, they only go after China and the United States. But very important jobs go to India, including, I heard, credit card and other things. And this is a problem because there might be some fraud, but they don't care. Corporations don't care, right? So in order to prevent rebellion, they give all the young gentlemen basically free kitty called a girlfriend, which is really a free escort in the West. So Western values promote using women as a discount escort, and drugs, sex, rock and roll, which is a highly misogynist environment. And so Cassie was singing in the entertainment industry, and she was singing about, giving free kitty, right? And then the next thing is they promote women having a career. So Cassie signed, I think, 10 albums, and Beyonce only signed an 8-album deal. So in order to sign, feminism promotes ambition, right? Career ambition. So she signed this multi-album deal, right? And she didn't understand that she would have to sell her soul, her body, and just have so much trauma to get that far to the top, to the point it would not be worth it. Many gentlemen said, "Oh my goodness, well, she requested those freakoffs. They don't understand the nature of young girls." I was one. So my parents discouraged me from modeling, but eventually I got into Miss Universe, and then after that I started modeling, but I started thankfully at 25. I believe that modeling should be illegal without bringing your parent to the photo shoot if you're under the age of 25. I'm sorry, right? But young ladies cannot consent. I know this because at photo shoots, people thought I was younger than my age, and I was the first, Yemeni woman in this universe, and I covered up my swimsuit, right? And that's why I was in the news, in all the newspapers in the world. So photographers, because I was all over the press, I was very hard to miss, right? At that time, I was the most famous woman in Ottawa in that week, so, in Canada even. And of course, all the photographers, because I was all over the news, wanted to work with me, right? Then, the next thing I know, I'm doing a shoot, and they try to pressure me to shoot nude. And I said, "You contacted me because you read an article in a newspaper of how I covered my swimsuit for Donald Trump and told Donald frigging Trump no. And you tiny little insect photographer from Ottawa, who on earth do you think you are? When I worked with international photographers, who on earth do you think you are to request me to, show some cleavage, let alone shoot nude. I'm sorry. You must be out of your mind. And then, oh, they tried to blackmail me. I said, listen, I can take you to court. I can sue you. I can make sure you can never work a day in your life. You have no idea who I am, okay? I mean, you have. I'm all over the press, right? And who on earth are you? I'm sorry. You contacted me and my agency because of who I am, and you're lucky that I said yes. So if you want me to say, oh, you're not being professional. I said, this is sexual harassment. If you continue talking, you'll be talking to my lawyers. So these photographers tried to destroy my reputation, tried to blackmail me, They failed. I couldn't care less because modeling was not my career. I was 25, right? So I told them, no, why should I care? What's wrong with you? Okay, if you continue, you'll see my lawyers. And, and then they found out I was 25 years old. Absolutely not malleable, not someone you want to mess with, okay? So they learned, and I could say no, and my ability to walk away was my strength. In modeling, because there are too many young pick-me's who are too young to consent, there is a grape culture. And I think Western culture is a grape culture in general because of this whole girlfriend-boyfriend. If you have not been working for 2 years, paying your own rent, and you're female, I'm sorry, but you're a child, and you cannot consent any more than a 10-year-old boy. In fact, a 10-year-old boy, I would say, has more agency to say yes or no, and is more likely. I think a 10-year-old boy should have a driving license before a 23-year-old girl should, I know it's controversial, but many girls will do whatever, right? Just to be picked, just to be liked, until they start, paying their own bills, paying their rent, and then they grow up and realize that if they do whatever to be picked, they'll be a hollow shell of themselves, and at the end it's not worth it. And there are other ways they can pay their bills and be happy. So we do mature, we do grow up. And I remember when I started working in the parliament, it was a high-powered environment, and being nice, trying hard to please people, backfired on me, okay? So what I would tell my younger self is to be a biatch, okay? If you're under 25, you should be a biatch and look like one, okay? Like, not be a witch, who's hating on people, creating problems for no reason. But you should show up in black, leather if you can. And, in black leather, in heels, etc. Very dark. Don't talk to anyone. Be very professional. And then what you should do is you should nag, okay? In a positive way, as in, don't be helpful at all. Except once, be quiet, read the room, and then when should you be helpful? You should point out their weakness and offer to help. For example, you can say, oh, your desk is more, disorganized than I used to. I would love to help you. I have some organizational systems that work for me, right? You should always be organized. If you have ADD, get some coaching, right? I have that. So I had to learn, you have to be neat and also strong boundaries. So, work finishes at 5, so at 4:30 you should be cleaning up your desk. And yes, that's part of your job, is to be neat, right? So you should say, well, you're paying me to be professional, and part of being professional is to be neat. So, doing office-related work, being neat is an organizing, is still office-related work, And I start cleaning at 4:30 and my desk is clean at 5. At 5 o'clock sharp, you should leave, okay? If you're paid for X, you work for X. You do not work more and quiet quit. Don't be too nice. You won't be respected, okay? And when I was younger, I tried too hard to be liked. I tried to work extra. And all that got was resentment, gossip, etc. And the people who thrived, they only did what they were asked, okay? So, and they had strong boundaries. It wasn't the nicest, most helpful women who succeeded. It was the women with the strongest boundaries who succeeded in the parliament. I think I told you ladies in the past video of the most successful lady I saw working in the parliament. And so I asked her, being young and a pick me, when I graduated I worked too hard. And it created more problems than respect because I was trying too hard to be liked. And, I went to ask for advice for the most successful woman in my workplace, who was a middle-aged older lady. So I said, what do you do? How come you're so successful? What advice can you give? She said, boundaries. I said, oh, could you talk about it? She said, yes, absolutely. So I said, okay, so what do you mean? She said that when her boss would give her 3 files and say that these files, on Thursday must be finished by Friday, she said no. On top of my other duties, at most, I can do 1 file. And he said, no, you're doing them all. She said, pick one. He said, no, you're doing them all. She said, pick one or I will pick for you, okay? So I can deliver this by this time and that by that time. If you don't want that, fire me and hire someone else. So she was not afraid to be fired because she knew and had the confidence that no one could do a decent job on those files. And if he fired her and they tried to cram in those 3 files, they'd do a poor job and he would ask for her back. So she had that confidence of saying no. And I was astonished. I thought, oh, that's what I should learn. So this is what you learn, but when you start, you want to be a people pleaser when you start working. So when you start dating and so on, when you're that age, especially if P Diddy said he picked Cassie because she was malleable, that's what he meant. Many red pill men say, oh, they want a younger girl because she has a low body count or malleable. So they mean that she's easy to abuse, right? But when you're 25, and I was still a virgin at that age, I was able to say no. Luckily, I had a makeover, and then I became beautiful at 25, and I was an ugly duckling before that. So when gentlemen were interested in me, luckily for me, it was at an age where I had self-confidence to say no, and so my consent was real. But, if you haven't been working for a few years, right, I'm sorry, you don't consent any more than a child does if you're a woman. And, the no of a 10-year-old boy, I would say, is much more consent than the yes of a 19-year-old girl. Feminism says we're equal, but we're really not. Many 10-year-old male children are more disagreeable than, a young lady in her early 20s, late teens, trying to have a career, thinking she needs to be the cool girl to get ahead. Now, if you've seen the movie Gone Girl about cool girls who pretend to like so many things that they absolutely hate, and then they go crazy. That's, really about what all this consent is. It's not consent at all. So Diddy's lawyers showed, oh, she really consented to those freakoffs. She kept mailing Diddy she was ready for another freakoff. No, she didn't consent. It was triangulation because he had another girlfriend who was the mother of his children, who got, Christmas and holidays with his kids. And he was triangulating them pitting them against each other. So Cassie thought if she didn't do freakoffs, she would lose everything, right? If she's no longer Diddy's girlfriend, she could be blacklisted from the industry. She could lose her ability to pay her bills. Diddy's lawyers tried to paint a picture that Cassie was a floozy when he was her second boyfriend. She's a low body count and came from a traditional family. So, when she asked to do some very despicable, disgusting acts, she didn't want to, but she thought she had to do this and had to be the cool girl and pretend to be into things so that, she doesn't get hurt in that industry, doesn't get blackmailed. There's footage of him beating her, so she thought she had to be the cool girl, to be liked, to be picked, in his better graces as a pick-me. And most of us were pick-me's at 19 years old. Even if our parents raised us as a queen, in a new environment, a new job that we're not used to, we will do that. It takes a couple years to realize that being a pick-me gets you nowhere, right? So, at 19 and he's a middle-aged man, that is predatory behavior, sorry. So if you're under the age of 25 and an older man wants to date you, majority of this is because it's predatory behavior and this affluent or powerful gentleman thinks you're malleable. If you're 25 and over, it can be a genuine connection. But if it's under the age of 25, what do you have in common? Most of it is abuse, okay? So that's why I caution ladies that, don't date someone your father's age if you're under the age of 25. You might think you're smart, you might think after watching all those Shira videos you're cool, you're a cool girl, you're in control, but really you're not. They know how to play you, right? So he threatened even her parents that he will release compromising videos that he made from her unless they give him $30,000 to compensate him for breaking up with her. So ladies, when you're dating successful gentlemen, you need to have your own leverage to be able to walk away and not do anything compromising, alright? That if he releases any footage, you can be like, okay, and you can sue him also. So, I caution against sleeping with someone in the same industry, right? You should always have the leverage to walk away in relationships if you want to be happy. And that's sort of the main lesson. Don't be a pick-me and don't date in situations where you will be blacklisted or in trouble if you walk away. Finally, don't be so ambitious and stay away from high-powered environments before the age of 25. If I could give my younger self any advice, it would be this. Stay away from high-powered environments. Work at McDonald's, if you need to. Obviously, probably not McDonald's because I just don't vibe with them. But, work in some average place, work for Microsoft as a secretary, right? Don't have a big ego. Work for a mid place, okay? Don't work for a high power environment. Work for a mid place and, get to the rank of manager. Get some clout in a mid place before you go anywhere and have a network and have supporters. Then, when you're 25 and go into a high-powered environment from a place where you have a support network, people are much less likely to mess with you. Also, my advice to young ladies, don't work for the entertainment industry. If you do care for these things, become your own star on TikTok, YouTube, whatever. But don't work with 40-year-old, 50-year-old gentlemen when you're 19. So these photographers tried to destroy my reputation, tried to blackmail me, They failed. I couldn't care less because modeling was not my career. I was 25, right? So I told them no. Why should I care? What's wrong with you? Okay, if you continue, you'll see my lawyers. And, and then they found out I was 25 years old. Absolutely not malleable, not someone you want to mess with, okay? So they learned, and I could say no, and my ability to walk away was my strength. In modeling, because there are too many young pick-me's who are too young to consent, there is a grape culture. And I think Western culture is a grape culture in general because of this whole girlfriend-boyfriend. If you have not been working for 2 years, paying your own rent, and you're female, I'm sorry, but you're a child and you cannot consent any more than a 10-year-old boy. In fact, a 10-year-old boy, I would say, has more agency to say yes or no and is more likely. I think a 10-year-old boy should have a driving license before a 23-year-old girl should, I know it's controversial, but many girls will do whatever, right? Just to be picked, just to be liked, until they start, paying their own bills, paying their rent, and then they grow up and realize that if they do whatever to be picked, they'll be a hollow shell of themselves, and at the end it's not worth it. And there are other ways they can pay their bills and be happy. So we do mature, we do grow up. And I remember when I started working in the parliament, it was a high-powered environment, and being nice, trying hard to please people, backfired on me, okay? So what I would tell my younger self is to be a biatch, okay? If you're under 25, you should be a biatch and look like one, okay? Like, not be a witch, who's hating on people, creating problems for no reason. But you should show up in black, leather if you can. And, in black leather, in heels, etc. Very dark. Don't talk to anyone. Be very professional. And then what you should do is you should nag, okay? In a positive way. As in, don't be helpful at all. Except once, be quiet, read the room. And then, when should you be helpful? You should point out their weakness and offer to help. For example, you can say, oh, your desk is more, disorganized than I used to. I would love to help you. I have some organizational systems that work for me. Right? You should always be organized. If you have ADD, get some coaching, right? I have that. So I had to learn, you have to be neat and also strong boundaries. So, work finishes at 5, so at 4:30 you should be cleaning up your desk. And yes, that's part of your job, is to be neat, right? So you should say, well, you're paying me to be professional, and part of being professional is to be neat. So, you know, doing office related work, being neat is and organizing is still office related work, and I start cleaning at 4:30 and my desk is clean at 5. At 5 o'clock sharp you should leave, okay? If you're paid for X, you work for X. You do not work more and quiet quit. Don't be too nice. You won't be respected, okay? And when I was younger, I tried too hard to be liked. I tried to work extra, and all that got was resentment, gossip, etc. And the people who thrived, they only did what they were asked, okay? So, and they had strong boundaries. It wasn't the nicest, most helpful women who succeeded. It was the women with the strongest boundaries who succeeded in the parliament. That's why I do think we have to rethink things, that sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it does not help ladies get ahead in life, right? It's misogynist, only benefits the worst males, okay? So maybe to stay away from that. And, instead of ambition, think of being a hottie with hobbies, that you're happy to pay your rent, and think of your own happiness first and put it first. And if a gentleman does not make you happier than when you're alone, or a job doesn't make you happier than otherwise, say no. Having confidence, having standards is so important. And not listening to low vibrational music because it's popular. I think rejecting what is popular is the best way to level up, except being hated and being uncool. Because the worst thing you can do to yourself, like the worst thing that happened to Cassie, is being a pick-me. Because you will degrade yourself to be picked. You'll become a shadow of yourself, and you will regret your life choices. And then people will say, oh, she's a floozy because she consented. But you well know that you didn't consent. You did all those things to be liked, to be picked. Please pick me, right? And then you regret your life decisions. Some women even marry abusive gentlemen and will do whatever they think will please them to be the cool girl in hopes of being picked, and then in the marriage realize that they were much happier single all along. Ladies, choose yourself first. It's better to be hated, but to choose yourself first than to be picked and degrade yourself into a shell of your own humanity. The lesson I learned is that it's better to be hated but to be true to yourself. It's better to have no friends but yourself and be true to yourself and have dignity. And believe me, that will make you in a higher vibration, and your vibe attracts your tribe. If you feel the strength that you're better off alone, you will have a higher vibration and start to connect and draw the right people to you. If you're desperate to be liked, that you will make yourself small just to fit in, instead of saying, okay, that is not my vibe tribe, I'm walking away. You will be crushed in this world. So ladies, my message is don't dim your shine for other people. Always be willing to walk away from any situation that makes you unhappy, because it will traumatize you if you stay. Of course, the Diddy Cassie situation is extreme. But let's say you pretend you like hiking and you actually prefer staying indoors reading books, and you twist yourself in a pretzel to try to fit in with a certain group. You will hate your life. You will traumatize yourself. And then the people will realize, well, you never really wanted to hike, and it will never work out for you. So ladies, be true to yourself, choose yourself first, be authentic. It will pay off as you get older. That's what I learned in my 40s from my youth, to be authentic and to choose myself first, okay? So if you like this content, please hit like. If you hate it, please hate and tell everyone how awful my videos are. Like or hate, share and subscribe. Arrivederci!